"Get him off the air now." Those were the words echoing through the control room of Good Morning America, just seconds before the screen cut to black. But before chaos struck, the morning had started like any other bright lights. Warm coffee and carefully rehearsed smiles. The legendary Morgan Freeman, known for his calm wisdom and timeless presence, had walked onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. Viewers expected an inspiring interview about his latest film, his legacy, and perhaps a few philosophical reflections, not a confrontation that would shake live television to its core. From the first few moments, though, something felt off. George Stephanopoulos, ever composed and sharp, exchanged pleasantries that sounded more like chess moves. His eyes, analytical and unblinking, gave away that this wasn't going to be just another Hollywood chat. The producers behind the glass sensed it too. Subtle tension crept into the room, that quiet, electric kind that always precedes something explosive. As Morgan spoke, his deep, measured voice filled the studio, each word commanding attention. Yet in the corners of the room, whispers grew. The conversation was heading somewhere unplanned, somewhere dangerous. The audience laughed at his jokes, unaware they were seconds away from witnessing the most uncomfortable TV moment in years. And then George shifted in his chair, placed his notes aside, and asked a question no one on set saw coming. The atmosphere changed instantly. Smiles faded, eyes widened, and cameras zoomed in closer. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. That was the moment when morning television stopped being polite and started burning. Asterisk, it came out of nowhere, sharp, deliberate, and heavier than the air itself. George Stephanopoulos leaned forward, his tone shifting from friendly to forensic. He said, "Mr. Freeman, you've spoken about division and media bias before, but don't you think it's hypocritical to criticize the system when you've benefited the most from it?" For a split second, time froze. You could feel every heartbeat in the room. Crew members stopped moving. The audience fell silent, and even the steady hum of the cameras seemed to fade. Morgan didn't flinch. He simply looked at George long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then, with that unmistakable voice that had narrated decades of truth and fiction, he said, "Benefiting from the system doesn't mean I have to worship it." A few clapped nervously. George pressed on, sensing both danger and opportunity. "But isn't that convenient?" he replied, his words careful but cutting. "To condemn the same world that gave you your platform?" Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Maybe," he said slowly, "the problem isn't success. Maybe the problem is how success makes people forget where they came from." That line hit like a thunderclap. George tried to pivot, but the crowd's reaction broke his rhythm. There was no going back now. This was no longer an interview. It was a philosophical duel, live on national television. In the control room, the producer mouthed silently, cut to commercial. But no one dared to move, and as the tension thickened, a faint smile crossed Morgan's face, the kind that says, "You wanted honesty? You just got it." Asterisk, George tried to regain control, but Morgan's calm had turned to fire, a quiet, contained storm. He leaned forward, voice low yet thunderous. "You know, George, I've spent my life watching people confuse politeness with truth. You ask me about hypocrisy, but maybe the real hypocrisy is pretending that power in this country is shared equally." The audience didn't dare breathe. Every word landed like a weight. George blinked, caught off guard by the conviction in Morgan's tone. "I'm not questioning your experience," he said carefully. "I'm questioning your consistency." Morgan chuckled, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Consistency," he echoed. "You want consistency in a world that changes its rules depending on who's speaking?" Silence. The studio was frozen in that moral crossfire. One man representing control, the other conscience. Morgan leaned back, eyes steady. "You asked for my truth," he said. "Don't be surprised when it doesn't fit your format." The line drew nervous applause, half admiration, half shock. Even George couldn't hide the tremor in his smile. For the first time that morning, Good Morning America felt anything but good. Asterisk, the next few seconds felt endless. George opened his mouth to respond, but Morgan cut in, calmly, decisively. "You invited me here for honesty," he said. but it seems what you really want is comfort." The words hit like a hammer. A ripple went through the audience. Whispers, gasps, shifting seats. The producers in the control room panicked. "Cut! Cut now!" one shouted, but the director froze. They all knew this moment was too raw to interrupt. George tried to diffuse the tension, forcing a smile. "Morgan, let's not turn this into—" But before he could finish, Freeman raised a hand. "No, let's—" The crowd erupted, half cheering, half stunned. It was the kind of television moment no one could script, truth colliding headfirst with authority. Then, suddenly the audio flickered. The feed stuttered, and without warning, the screen faded to black silence. Viewers at home were left staring at their TVs, confused, shocked, waiting for an explanation that never came. Inside the studio, Morgan stood up slowly, removed his microphone, and walked off stage, his face unreadable, but his message unforgettable. Asterisk, the moment the broadcast went dark, chaos erupted backstage. Producers shouted over each other, headsets crackling with confusion. What just happened? Is he gone? Did we lose the feed? Phones buzzed like sirens. Social media was already catching fire. Clips of the confrontation were being uploaded within seconds. Morgan stood quietly near the exit, unbothered by the frenzy around him. His publicist rushed in, whispering, "They're already calling it a walkout." He simply nodded. "Then let them," he said. Voice calm but final. George emerged from the set moments later, adjusting his tie, face pale but controlled. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, avoiding eye contact with the crew. The tension between professionalism and panic filled the air like smoke. ABC executives joined the scene within minutes. One demanded, "Do we continue the segment?" Another replied, "We can't, it's everywhere already." By the time Morgan left the building, paparazzi were waiting outside, flashbulbs slicing through the air. He didn't say a word, just stepped into his car, eyes fixed ahead. Behind him, Good Morning America was in full crisis mode. The internet was turning a morning interview into breaking history. Asterisk, within an hour, the internet was ablaze. Hashtags like hashtag Morgan Freeman live and hashtag GMA Clash flooded every platform. Clips of the confrontation spread across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, each one edited, analyzed, and debated in real time. Some called it the most powerful moment on live TV in years, while others accused Morgan of crossing a line. Commentators rushed to upload reaction videos. Late-night hosts teased the story before sunset. Even celebrities weighed in, some applauding Freeman's courage, others defending George's professionalism. News headlines painted two completely different pictures, one of rebellion, the other of disrespect. But one thing was clear: everyone was watching. A single exchange had become a cultural flashpoint. Blurring the line between journalism and confrontation, ABC released a short statement about technical difficulties. But no one bought it. Fans flooded comment sections demanding answers. Morgan, meanwhile, stayed silent. No posts, no interviews. Just that quiet, dignified absence that made the world lean in even closer. By nightfall, millions had replayed the clip, not just for the words spoken, but for the unspoken tension behind them. It wasn't just viral. It was historic. Asterisk. By the next morning, every major outlet had one headline on repeat. Morgan Freeman walks out of GMA after explosive clash. ABC scrambled to control the narrative, insisting the segment had been misinterpreted. But viewers weren't fooled. They had seen it live. Unfiltered, undeniable. Meanwhile, Morgan finally broke his silence. In a brief statement, he said, "Honesty should never be treated like hostility." That single line went viral all over again, shared millions of times in just hours. Fans flooded his pages with support, praising him for standing his ground with grace and wisdom. Inside ABC, tensions ran high. Some staff quietly admitted that George's question had gone too far. Others believed it was great television. The damage, or perhaps the awakening, was done. What could have been just another celebrity interview had transformed into a national conversation about truth, ego, and the cost of authenticity in media. And as the noise faded, one thing became clear. Morgan Freeman hadn't lost his composure. He'd simply reminded the world that even in the age of scripted smiles, truth still has a voice, and it will always be heard. Asterisk. What happened that morning wasn't just television, it was a revelation. It showed what truly happens when truth refuses to stay silent, even under the brightest studio lights. Morgan Freeman didn't just walk off a set, he walked into history. His calm defiance became a reminder that authenticity still matters in a world addicted to perfection. Millions tuned in expecting another polished interview, but what they got was something raw, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. That's why people couldn't stop watching, because deep down, they saw something real. No PR filters. No scripted charm. Just a man who refused to be boxed in by expectation, and that's exactly what we uncover here, the unfiltered stories behind the spotlight. Moments that make the world pause, argue, rethink, and feel.